the final boss has arrived. Bound erased generic types in PHP, or in other words, generics in PHP that aren't type checked at runtime. This is the way. We're gonna read through the RFC. This is the best attempt ever yet to actually add generics in PHP. I really hope this succeeds. We're gonna read through it and I'm gonna add my comments along the way. Let's dive in. So this one is by Ajesh, the creator of Mago, very talented programmer. We've been using Mago in Tempest for years now. And Ajesh, if I pronounce it correctly, is serious about this one. This RFC adds generic type syntax to PHP, classes, interfaces, anything can declare type parameters. Those parameters carry bounds, defaults, and variance markers. Type arguments may be supplied at use side and at call sides via Turbofish. I don't know, what is Turbofish? We'll figure it out. So one thing, I will assume that you know what generics are. If you don't know, stop this video in 1 minute. Go to my channel, go to playlists, scroll down, and here is generics in PHP. Watch this. It will take less than half an hour and it will explain everything you need to know. So either you pause the video here and you come back in half an hour, or you already know what generics are. This is the syntax Ajesh proposes. I'm sure we'll figure out the details. Let's first actually read through, not this part, because I assume you know what generics is about, why people use generics. People do use generics in PHP. They just write them in a comment. Every major framework, ORM, testing library, and standard library project in the PHP ecosystem today carries generic type information in PHP doc that static analysis tools parse and validate. The information is real, the relationships are load-bearing, and the codebases break in subtle ways when the doc blocks drift from the implementation. What follows is a tour of generics in production PHP code as it exists today in projects readers will recognize. I just love this. Ajesh is doing such a great job at telling a story and actually drawing people in. I love it. I love it. Laravel, a doubly generic collection. The collection class, classic example. Symfony, a covariant user provider. Of course, there are many more generics in Laravel and many more generics in Symfony. We'll get to his conclusion in a second, where you extend from an interface and then fill in the generic type that way. PHP standard library, a multi-parameter graph interface, where you have nested generics. Doctrine, a generic method on a non-generic interface. And this one is usually because of class string. I actually wonder if the RFC addresses the class string type. Because it is really useful. Tempest, that one I know. So this is where the input actually determines the type of output. Basically just to ensure that you have method chaining along the way. API platform implementing a generic interface like this. PHP unit, a constraint that returns its input. Like so, which is kind of similar as the Tempest one, right? These are 7 different shapes of generic usage. That's a list we just scroll through. Different ways of how we use generics. 7 different projects by 7 different teams arrived independently at the same conclusion. PHP needs generics. Just cinema. They also, in practice, arrived at the same syntax. Template T, optionally followed by off X for a bound. And then the TU arguments at sides, inheritance following tags like extends, implement, template extends, template implements. A reader who can read one of these projects' generic declarations can read all of them. The convergence is real and it's ecosystem-wide, but it didn't happen through a standard process. There is no specification for add template. There is no governance, no version number, no shared test suite that defines correctness. What exists is a set of static analysis tools, Mago, PHP Stem, Psalm, Fan, and the PHP doc parsers inside IDEs that have over a decade looked at each other and said, we should support that too. This is real, and this is the #1 problem I want fixed, by the way. Let's not talk about syntax for a second, but let's just talk about the subtle differences between how many tools are there. Around 6 different static analysis tools, and I work at PHP Storm, so I know what goes on behind the scenes when it comes to generic typing. There is no specification to follow. If PHP Stan one day decides, hey, we're gonna add this fancy syntax, PHP Storm basically has to follow. If Psalm the other day decides to add something else, then we just look at each each other. And everyone is always behind because a feature pops up in one library and then the other one copies it around. On top of that, the biggest problem for PHP Storm is that PHP Storm has to do live static analysis as you type compared to all the other tools who are doing it in bulk in a separate type checking step. You run a command and you wait for it to finish. PHP Storm has to do it in real time and very fast. So that adds a whole other layer of complexity there that other tools don't have to take into account. It is crazy that it actually works at this level. It's a madness that can only be solved by proper spec, which, by the way, we tried to make 6-7 years ago. We tried to bring all the static analysis people together. That didn't work out, unfortunately. The only way to solve this problem is if PHP internals comes up with a spec and says, this is what generics should do, and then everyone will follow. When PHP Stan shipped at template T is foo for default type arguments, Mago added it because users asked for it. The arrows go in every direction. What gets adopted is whatever a critical mass of users started to write. This kind of convergence is fragile. The agreed upon core, the part every tool reads the same way, is solid. The edges are not. Tag aliases differ. Extends versus at template extends. Implements versus at template implements. By the way, one is Psalm, I think, the other is PHP Stan. And PHP Storm, we just have to follow. We just have to support everything, basically, because that's what users expect when they write PHP code. Edge cases in bound resolution differ, and the support level for variants, generic methods, and call side type arguments is uneven. The differences are invisible until a refactor crosses a boundary. The tools handle differently, at which point the user discovers their codebase has a hidden tool dependency in its doc blocks. This is so true. This is so true. And by the way, circling back to PHP Storm again, where we have to do real-time analysis. From a tool's point of view, it's pretty trivial to go X levels deep with the generic typing and not really care about performance because, hey, it's just a script that's being run in CI or after your code has been written. When people ask us for deeply nested generic support, for example, the same reason why it's so difficult to edit in PHP at runtime also affects PHP Storm. We're building a type tree internally, right? And generic types just add such overhead to how all of this works. These things can be fixed. They require a lot of effort. And you can imagine how we don't want to spend that effort if there are 5 other tools who might break it and force us to refactor again. That's just not sustainable. That's why we need a proper spec driven by PHP internals. The largest cost, however, is structural. The syntax exists and is in production use, and it's not in PHP. The PHP parser ignores it. The PHP runtime ignores it. The PHP reflection API has nothing to expose it. The community standardized, the language did not catch up. Just beautiful. The cost of expressing generics in a comment is paid in 5 recurring ways. The parser cannot validate the type information. At template is a string in a comment block. Misspell template as at template or tempalte, something I do often, and the type information is silently lost. PHP doesn't notice, and depending on the tool, the analyzer might not either. Refactors miss the doc block. Rename a class via an IDE, and the rename usually updates uses of the class in .php file. Uses inside at template parent blah 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 are not always touched. Again, we try to do this as best as possible, but it circles back to these limitations that we have trying to do real-time analysis. The result is a doc block that disagrees with the code silently until something breaks. Reflection has no view. This is an important one. Reflection class get names return collection, not collection key model. Frameworks that need generic information for serialization, dependency injection, attribute processing, or runtime metadata either reparse source file or shell out to a static analysis tool. This is real. This is a real problem. In Tempest, we actually have a couple of places where we parse strings at runtime to get generic type information because we use it in our ORM, for example. Tools disagree on what the syntax means. Mago, PHP Stan, and some differ on edge cases. PHP Storm parses some forms and not others. Again, that is because of real-time complexity. The differences are invisible until a refactor crosses a boundary the tools handle separately. It splits PHP into 2 languages. A reader of a generic Laravel class is reading 2 parallel type systems at the same time. PHP types in the signatures, PHP doc types in the doc blocks. The 2 often disagree, public function pop mixed next to @return_t. Yeah. The reader has to know which one is authoritative. For what purpose? Ajesh actually looked at the scale as well. The pattern is not niche. A search of public PHP code on GitHub returns over 200,000 files using template, and then a couple thousand SAM and PHP stand template. The features above are not edge cases used by a single library author. They are infrastructure dependent on transitively by the entire PHP application ecosystem. Adopting native syntax does not introduce generics into PHP. Generics have been in PHP for a decade. Beautiful. It formalizes what is already there, a feature PHP developers use every day, expressed in the only language within reach that didn't have a place for it. This is just so beautiful. This is like the best RFC ever written. We're 25% in, and we haven't seen the feature yet, but we're so on board with the need for it. I love it. Okay, userland preprocessors. I don't know if I want to go into this. The demand for generics is real enough that PHP developers have shipped userland transpilers to provide them. All of these projects failed because there is just no proper support for it. I made a lot of content on pre-processing as well, both on this channel and my blog. It's just, it doesn't work as long as the tooling doesn't follow. And the tooling doesn't follow because there is no proper spec to follow. Generics in PHP have always been the subject of proposals, implementations, articles, conference talk, and community discussions for over a decade, 2 decades probably by this point. And this section walks through the history so the present RFC can be read against what came before, and so that readers who are encountering the topic for the first time understand they are not the first. In type hints take root, generic surface on the mailing list. Oh yeah, okay, yeah, so it is a decade, a little longer, yeah. PHP's modern type system began landing in the early 7x cycle. In January 14, Philip Sturgeon raised generics on internals, asking whether there was interest in a formal proposal. Sarah Goldman posted a summary of what the Hip Hop VM and Hack already accepted for typed arrays and generics. No RFC came out of these discussions, but the topic entered the core agenda and has not left it since. In parallel, the PHP Framework Interrupts group PSR5 drafted a generics notation for the doc-block language that PHP itself did not support. PSR5 stalled and remains a draft, but its grammar prefigured the template syntax that static analysis tools later converged on. This is not coming from the fig. This should come from PHP core. Ben Scholzen and Rasmus Schulz proposed a reified generics design in 2016 with active internals discussion that April. The proposal covered classes, interfaces, and etc. etc. The RFC target 7.1. The RFC has remained in draft status for a decade despite ongoing interest and revision. No implementation accepted by internals has emerged during that time. The reified design surfaced complexity that subsequent attempts each had to confront. Type checks at runtime are expensive, especially for compound types, etc. etc. So yeah, reified generics is not happening. Reified generics means generics at runtime and type checking them at runtime, which is a crazy thing to do because generics are a tool used for static analysis and aren't useful for runtime, except for the reflection API that we do need. Frameworks can actually benefit from reading that reflection data at runtime, but type checking itself, it is something that should happen at compile time / static analysis time and not during runtime. So let's just forget the idea of reified generics. It's not going to happen. Static analysis fills the gap, and then 2020 to 2022 implementation attempts and IDE catch up. Nikita Popov produced an implemental reified generics implementation in its fork. Following the 2016 RFC, the implementation surfaced significant challenges: superlinear complexity in type checking for compound type, memory costs of per instance reified type information, and the difficulty of cross-file type inference. The work was not completed and did not reach the RFC stage. Again, reified generics, they are not viable in a language like PHP. In parallel, JetBrains brought generics into PHP Storm based on the SAM syntax because there was no convention, and SAM was the biggest one back then. Reaching close to feature parity with the static analysis tools by the end of 2021, the ecosystem now had generics in IDEs, static analyzers, and in doc blocks everywhere except the language. I love that. In July 21, Brent, oh, that's me, published We Don't Need Runtime Type Checks on Stitcher. You can read this one. I explain why we don't need runtime type checks, basically. An early public articulation of the case for this RFC ships, that PHP's existing type checking model can accommodate erased generics without compromising existing invariants. The article noted that the author had not encountered a type error in production code in years, attributed to static analysis adoption, and that's still true to this day, and quoted Sarah Goldman estimating 5 years. This is so painful. I once brought this up to internals, the same ideas as Ajesh is proposing. I call them transpiled generics. With that I mean that they were just ignored at runtime. Bad naming. And Sarah here, I agree that there's real value in Heckling's approach. It's just that there is a mountain of inertia around the PHP way, and it's going to take an equal and opposite mountain to alter course. Entirely possible, even probable, but we won't see that level of shift in the next 5 years. Unfortunately, it's been 6. Then there was this issue. It argued for syntax and reflection only generics on the same grounds repeated in this RFC. The dog block approach has reached its limits. The language needs to provide the syntax, runtime semantics can be added later. The discussion identified the same use cases, the same advantages, and the same anticipated opposition. The 21 discussion concluded informally that this was a viable path forward, but it did not produce an RFC. The pattern goes mainstream. Me again. I published a 4-part series on Stitcher. These are the videos, the playlist I referred to earlier, by the way. You can... DevSense shipped generic support in PHP tools for VS Studio. Oh, interesting, hadn't seen that one. Laravel 9 annotated its collection classes with template parameters, putting generics via doc blocks in front of every new Laravel application. Doctrine, Symfony, and Tempest followed. Hey, there's Tempest again, also nice. The material covered in the previous section is the steady state result of decisions made in this period. In 2023, frameworks ship generics by doc block as a feature has reached the conference circuit. Symfony Live Paris hosted a generics in PHP talk. IPC Munich has its own. The community-facing tone shifted from here's a workaround to here's how production PHP works now. Tool authors continue to converge. PHP Storm, Mago, and other analyzers track changes from PHP Stan and Psalm. Framework maintainers convert on a core at template syntax even as tag aliases varied. The PHP Foundation re-engages. This was last year. Also did a video on that one. At the start of 24, under the auspices of the PHP Foundation, Arnaud resumed work on reified generics. If you want to watch me read through all of that, there was this live stream 9 months ago. It's not even too long ago. In mid-25, the Foundation's Gina Banyard began work on what was first described as associative types. Also did a live stream on that one, where the answer is nay. For sure, that was not the way forward. Where this leaves us, this RFC is the first complete bound erase generics implementation proposed to internals. The next section describes what it does. We are almost halfway through. Great job, Ajesh. And so I have to admit, at this point, I don't really care that much what the syntax look like exactly. I want 4 things. I want a proper specification that everyone will follow. I want syntax in PHP because type information is more than just a comment. I don't want them checked at runtime because this is not a runtime feature. And I want the type information available via reflection because it is useful for meta programming. And so I'm just gonna scroll through. I'm gonna read it in depth at a later point, but let's just look at some of the code blocks here and not worry about the details because this RFC has just gone up for discussion. Many things will change still, but this is what we expect generics to look like. The problem of syntax has been solved many times by many languages before. It's just you declare it with the angle brackets and then you use it as a generic type in places. And we can do a deeper dive into syntax if you want to. Let me know in the comments down below. The plus and minus signs here, by the way, they are meant for to declare variants. Edge cases, use sites, array, and iterable. I do want to look, what was the turbofish thing? This is the turbofish syntax, I get it. Type arguments may be supplied at call side using the turbofish syntax. I don't really like that. The token is white space sensitive. Foo blah 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 is not a turbofish. It parses a scope resolution followed by a comparison. Turbofish exists primarily so static analysis tools can disambiguate type inference at the call side, and so the parser has no ambiguous form of that. So I don't really like it. It feels like the 2 colons should be gone here. Maybe that's still possible if more internals get involved, but Even if it doesn't go away, totally fine with it. Let's just keep it. Let's get this in. I'm fine. Fine with this. The reflection API all makes sense without a doubt. Some more details, what is not checked, limitations. Then Ajesh actually takes the time to explain feature by feature why we do this, why we do that. This is a great RFC, by the way. It's very long, of course, but he actually takes the time to try to explain to the people voting why every choice matters. What I am curious about is class string. And apparently the RFC doesn't really address it. So that's interesting. I'll ask Ajesh about that later. There was one more thing I wanted to read. Why shipping this RFC is the path forward. The runtime model question, reified, monomorphized, erased, is real. And the PHP community has been debating it for over a decade. None of the runtime models can be evaluated in the abstract. Each requires the syntax, the parser support, the metadata representation, the reflection surface, and the link time correctness machinery to even have something to layer on. This RFC ships those pieces. I just love how he does this. Even if you want reified or monomorphized generics, you still need this RFC. So let's take it step by step. That matters in two directions. Forward compatibility, reified generics, body level monomorphization, and any other runtime model proposed in the future RFCs would all layer on that same foundation. Not shipping this RFC does not bring future runtime models anytime closer. It only delays them. Beautiful. Every future generics RFC has to relegate the syntax bike shed, the reflection surface, the metadata representation, the parametric LSP question, and the bound erasure trade-off, alongside whatever runtime model it proposes. 2016 RFC stalled, the 20 to 21 reified attempt stalled, the 24 reified continuation stalled on cross-file interference, the 25 compile time generics proposal scopes itself narrowly to avoid relegating the broader syntax. Each attempt has paid the syntax cost and produced no syntax. The pattern is unlikely to break itself. This is beautiful. This is just Ajesh. Let's just give a thumbs up for Ajesh if you want to. This is just like beautifully phrased. It's taking the internal games of like continuous discussions and just turning it onto themselves. Like, we need this. Whatever you want in the future. We need this. And what you will see is that once we have this, nothing else will matter anymore. Because generics are not a runtime feature. We don't need runtime type checks. Write it in the comments if you agree. We don't need runtime type checks. Beautiful RFC. But here's the thing. I don't have super high hopes of this succeeding. And that's because there is a small group of people deciding on PHP's future. And they are very talented programmers, but many have already voiced that they don't want this approach. I hope we can change their mind. And for that, the PHP community has to speak up. We just have to let the people deciding on the future of the language know that this is the way forward. This is what we've been doing for years now. We have embraced generic typing. We've dealt with all the struggles that come with it because of the doc blocks and because of the different static analysis vendors who all do their own thing and the edge cases all differ from each other. We deal with all of that crap because generics are such a powerful tool, and we're willing to deal with them in their current form because even with crappy syntax and inconsistencies, they still have such benefit in real life. So let's, as a community, speak up and ask internals, please, just give us the thing we want. The RFC is here. The implementation is ready, by the way. Ajesh built it. It works. Let's just have this. This is what PHP needs. We've been talking about it for years. Let's just do it today. Leave your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.